Welcome to an analysis of May by Christina Rossetti. So to start us off with just a bit of an overview, this is an exploration of transience through an extended metaphor of seasons. So this poem is essentially about the belief that things don't last forever, that everything dies or everything ends. So it's quite a depressing poem in many ways. It is a truncated sonnet, so it's only 13 lines, which means it doesn't quite live up to the general expected standard of a sonnet, which could suggest that it's not a perfect love poem. So it suggests that there's something not quite right about the love that she might be talking about or the experience that she might be talking about. And that's kind of emphasized through her choice of form here. And the way that it is structured is that there's an octet of fruitfulness. So the first 8 lines, really happy, everyone's loving life. And then the second set of lines is desolation. So the next 5 lines are about how sad everything feels. Okay, so on to the analysis. As you can see, a really short poem, but lots to say about it. So she starts with, I cannot tell you how it was. So that cannot is quite an ambiguous opening. We don't know whether it's because she cannot express it, like she literally cannot explain how she feels, or it could be a secret that she's having to keep. And she seems like she's responding to a question that someone has asked her, an unnamed person has asked her perhaps. There's a direct address which feeds into this idea of her responding to someone specifically, or she could just be talking in a direct way to the reader or an unknown receiver. It's quite conversational in tone though, so it's almost confessional, like she's sharing something. The it is interesting, and it could signify that the event was too awful to be identified or too big to be explained, but there's something about it that almost seems like it's quite distant from her, that she can't quite put her finger on it. The positive imagery of the bright and breezy day foreshadows perhaps danger, so it's almost like the calm before the storm. It's a beautiful day and you almost feel like something bad is bound to happen, because that tends to be what happens in literature. And the breeziness and the brightness, the use of the bees there and the alliteration really emphasizes how joyful this day is. The exclamative emphasizes this joy again. It seems very carefree. When May was young, ah, pleasant May. So this exclamative really does show that she's having a wonderful time and this season is beautiful and everything just seems perfect. As yet the poppies were not born. So the narrator is looking ahead of time. So poppies tend to flower from June onwards. So she's looking towards the summer perhaps. And this starts to feed in those ideas of transience, of things not lasting forever. But could also be looking towards the idea of new life, so almost like the circle of life. So even though things don't last, new things replace the old things, and that's the circle of life. And from a Christian perspective, I guess that fits, because it's all about feeding into the circle and making sure you prepare the next generation and that kind of idea. The rigidity of the couplets is relaxed with breaks in rhyme. So again, this stops it from being a perfect sonnet, but the use of the break here doesn't make it seem less perfect. It just makes it seem less formal, almost like she cannot control her joy, or it cannot be contained in this very rigid structure. So you'll see was and pass don't rhyme, and yet and mate don't rhyme. So there's a break in the rhyming couplets, which suggests a break in the overall feeling and the tone. The full stop at the end of this octet suggests a volta, because it hasn't happened before. Usually it's semicolons or exclamation marks that end stop the lines, but in this case it is a full stop, which suggests that there's a change in tone. And then that leads us to the second part of the truncated sonnet, which is definitely a change in feelings. So the anaphora here emphasizes the secrecy or the inability to express a feeling, like it did at the beginning of the poem. It's just a reminder of what this poem's actually about. So it was easy for the reader to forget what the purpose of the poem was, because we're so caught up in the idea of May and how beautiful it is and everything being born and being lovely. But we forgot to focus on the fact that this it happens and we don't really know what it is. And then there's a repetition of passing and passed away, and this suggests an ending of some form. It could be a euphemism for death. It's quite often used to replace death in a euphemistic way. And it seems sad now that nothing lasts, and the tone seems to have really become quite melancholy quite quickly. The comparative here, so remember at the beginning of the poem it says came to pass, and towards the end of the poem it says but pass. So there's a difference now. In came to pass it seems like something happened and it was quite positive, but it did pass suggests that something has gone, something has ended. And the change in tone is again shown in the use of sounds in words. So we've got the alliteration of the B's in bright and breezy, which makes it seem exciting and wonderful. And then at the end, you've got the assonance of the old sound with the O, which makes it sound quite depressing. So the assonance in cold and old shows the passage of time and perhaps a sadness about aging and sadness about death. And this could be compared with At Home or Memory, that both look at the subject of death and how that impacts upon people.